Well, I don't think I need to say anything more. It's all in the videos. But you know I will. So anyway, I'm awfully glad you're here this morning. It's good to have you. Oops. At any rate, we had a few technical difficulties, so some of you may have hung around from first service because you didn't get to see all the videos then, but I don't see any of you, so I guess you didn't. I just want to make a comment about the survey and the results of the survey that Beth just shared with you. A few weeks, well, I guess it wasn't all that long ago, Mike Hurdle, who's head of our leadership team, sent me a video, link to a video that was the end of E.T. And if you remember the end of E.T., there is this go, stay, ouch. And that's sort of my response to this. Go, stay, ouch, it's hard, it's painful, it's difficult any way you look at it. But there are challenges ahead of us, but I'll tell you what, some of you were around when we started the garden 20 years ago and helped formulate it and make it all work. And there wasn't a prayer that this thing was going to work, that anything was going to really succeed. And people were going to show up. We didn't even know if anybody would come or not. And it wasn't us. It wasn't those of us who were working. It was God at work here. And then we had determined that if this was a God thing, this would all come to be. And it did. So as we move forward, and whatever that looks like, we just simply have to put our faith in God, that God will be with us, will not abandon us, and will help us make the right decisions and move forward in the right way. So we'll need everybody's time and energy and commitment, and away we go. So we'll see how it all happens. But just not everybody voted that way. There were lots and lots of comments. We appreciate. But we all need to pull together and move forward at this point. So anyway, thanks for hearing me out on that. There is a person by the name of Edwin Arlington Robinson who said this: 2 kinds of gratitude. The sudden kind we feel for what we take, the larger kind we feel for what we give. Well, as Beth said, last week we talked about what we receive and all the things that bless our lives. And now we're talking about what we're able to give, our time, our energy, our attention, in a way that we can bless others and that we can help others and share our love and compassion and care with other people. Probably the best example of someone who does that is Jesus. And the Bible passage we have for this morning is out of Luke's Gospel, and it tells a story that I've always liked. It's, I think, a very visual story, so kind of picture it in your mind as you hear the words and read the words. He was teaching in one of the meeting places on the Sabbath. There was a woman present, so twisted and bent over with arthritis that she couldn't even look up. She had been afflicted with this for 18 years. When Jesus saw her, he called her over. "Woman, you're free." He laid hands on her, and suddenly she was standing straight and tall, giving glory to God. Now, this particular version, this story is often referred to as the story of the bent-over woman. And this version out of the Message says that she was bent over because of arthritis. There are other translations of the Bible that aren't as specific. It doesn't really name what this is. But if it were in fact arthritis, then I can tell you, I for one can visualize what that might have looked like, because my grandmother had terrible arthritis. I never knew her to walk. She was confined to a wheelchair. And even though she died when I was quite young, I can still close my eyes and picture her hands that were all gnarled, and her fingers were all knobby, and her legs and feet were twisted all together. And you've probably seen or known someone who's experienced that kind of thing. It's very painful and very debilitating in many, many ways. So that's how it's described. It's described as a physical healing, physical issue. But we can't know for sure that that's what it is, because we've talked before how mind, body, spirit are all connected. And there's a way in which if we're mentally down, or if we're emotionally upset, if we've in any way been broken or beaten or downtrodden in any way, that it could also result in our looking as though we're bent over, or having the spirit as though we're bent over. Whatever it is, Jesus does in fact notice her, and that's really the key to this story, is how Jesus responds to the woman. Because we see in Jesus a reflection of who God is and what God is like. And this would be how we would see God responding to someone with this kind of difficulty, and how we should respond in this kind of difficulty. And so what does Jesus do? It's important to look at his actions. Well, the first thing he did was see her. He was paying attention to the people around him. He wasn't oblivious to all of them. He was attentive, and he sensed, he knew. It was sort of that sixth sense, that intuition, that somehow he knew something was wrong here. Either he could see it or he could sense it in one way or another. And then he acted. He didn't just stop with seeing her and then go on about his merry way. He, in fact, called out to her. He noticed her and called out to her, and when she came to him, he touched her. And we're told she stood straight and tall as a result of that. Now, to be quite honest, I don't know for sure what that is. I'm certainly not one to discount a physical healing, which could well have happened. But I also think there can be other kinds of healings as well. And perhaps it was, if this were not a physical thing and were instead something more emotional or mental or spiritual in some way, there perhaps was the sense in which just the fact that he saw her and noticed her, he looked with eyes of care and compassion, and she felt that and knew that. She felt as though she'd been given a gift of worth and dignity and value that maybe caused her to stand tall. We can't know for sure what it was, but all we know is something remarkable happened here, something that changed life for her. And Jesus said to her, "You're free. You're free of whatever it is that holds you down, that holds you back." And there are many ways in which we can find ourselves being free. Well, I think that's an important thing for us to note, that's our role. You see, if our mission in life is in any way to shape our lives and to try to live the way that Jesus lived his, then we're to respond to one another the way Jesus responded to her. We're to live our lives showing love and care and compassion for one another. So that means that we need to really look with eyes that see, that really pay attention, that become very aware of one another. You know, I'm afraid sometimes we are so totally self-consumed. We worry about what's going on with us or what we look like or how we're being received by someone else, that we don't really focus on the other. We only focus on ourselves. But Jesus didn't do that. He focused on other people. He sensed what was going on. He really gave his full attention and awareness to that. And that's why he was able to understand in ways that maybe we don't typically understand. But if we are people who really look with eyes that look deeply, that are perceptive, what do we see when we look around? Maybe we see the bent-over man in our office who's really, really struggling with life. Maybe we see an overburdened family member who is just trying to keep her head above water. Maybe we see a friend who's despondent. And you know, we've talked about before that what affects one of us affects all of us. And if we can show love and care and attention, then we lift the whole level of well-being. And if we lift the level of well-being for one person, then we do that for all of us. So it is really a matter of paying attention, of noticing and of acting and doing what we can. But there's a warning, I guess, that I need to include here too, because we have to be sure that we're not intrusive, that we don't in any way invalidate the respect for the other person. We don't want to do anything that's embarrassing or alienating, and it's a really fine line there. And I think the key is just what you saw in this last video. It's not about our agenda. It's keeping ourselves out of it and really totally focusing on the other person, letting that person's agenda, that person's needs really be the most important thing that we pay attention to. Well, there are lots and lots of stories that we know, that we could share, that we've seen or read about, that could tell us just how compassionate and caring people in this world really can be. There was a whole collection of stories that appeared on CNN and also were aired on NPR. And I read through several of them, and a couple of them really stood out for me, and in particular. One was about a man whose name was Mark Burgle. He is a resident of Washington, D.C., and he started an organization called A Wider Circle. And he believes that his mission is to help supply household goods and furnishings for the impoverished people in Washington. And that's 18% of the residents who live in poverty there. And even to extend his ministry there, he has started offering life skills workshops, because it's not just the material things that help, it's knowing how to handle them, how to manage the life that they have, or that they are encountering as they move along on this journey we call life. So that was one example of a way for a person to show compassion. There was another one too in Harlem. It had to do with a chef by the name of Daryl Burnett. And he realized that school-age kids really didn't have a clue how vegetables came into being. For example, they didn't know that corn, for instance, grew on a stalk and didn't grow in a can. And so he became part of and started giving 10 hours a week to something called Harlem Grown, which focuses on gardens, urban gardens, and helping that age child, school-age children, begin to learn about how vegetables are planted, how they grow, and begin to tend to them, and then to become more aware of healthy nutrition and what they need to make themselves a little better as people. He gives 10 hours a week to do that kind of thing. Now, both of those instances may seem to us as being pretty monumental. We may not have that kind of time or that kind of energy, and maybe we feel that if we can't do that, we can't do anything, and that's not right. We can do all kinds of things that work for us. So what do ordinary folks like us do? What can we do? Well, I think one of the things we can do is be attentive, be aware, and offer a word of encouragement if that's what's needed, or offer to give somebody a hug or a hand up in one way or another. I know that works, and it does make a difference, because I know that because of an experience I had a few weeks ago now. I was down in the dumps, and I don't get down in the dumps very often, but I was, and I guess it showed more than I was aware that it did. And I was talking to someone I know, I don't know terribly well, but I know her relatively well, and we were talking, and she seemed to sense that there was something going on within me in one way or the other, and she just said to me out of the blue, "Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Well, sure, of course." And she did give me a hug. And I can tell you the impact of that hug has stayed with me all this time. It made a huge difference for me that somebody noticed, that somebody cared, and that somebody was willing to take that risk and to reach out and offer a little word of support and care and compassion. It made a huge difference. So certainly we can do that kind of thing. You and I can do it. We have opportunities every single day to do that. But there's more too. There are ways in which we can help share the load and carry some of the work that others do. You know, one of the things that always touches me is if you hear about a farmer, say, for example, in a rural community who has an injury or becomes ill and can't get the crops out of the field at harvest time, or can't get them the seeds planted when it's time to plant. And what we often hear about is that every farmer in the community shows up with a combine or corn picker or whatever it is you need to do all that kind of work, comes and pitches in and helps out, helps to carry the load. And when everybody does that, it makes the load lighter, and it helps everything to move forward in a positive way. Now, most of us probably don't have a combine in the garage or corn pickers around anywhere, but we have ways that we can help. It's a matter of looking around us and seeing those. Is there a neighbor who hasn't gotten their sidewalk shoveled off yet? We can help do that. There's no reason why we can't. Or when the spring rolls around, and it will roll around, when it comes around, then we can go help somebody in their yard, because, you know, there's all that litter that gets around there in the course of winter that needs to be picked up and cleaned up and help people feel better. Those are little things we can do. Maybe there's a friend who needs to run errands or go to the doctor, and we could watch the kids for a while. Or maybe it's someone who just needs to be listened to, who needs a friendly ear to just listen and not to try to direct or guide, but just simply to be open and to listen to what's being said. You see, what I'm talking about is our ability to nurture a caring, compassionate, loving spirit within us. That's really what it's all about. Now, I wasn't here the last Sunday in December in 2014 because the flu bug got me, and Dana shared my message. But the essence of that message was really about keeping the spirit of Christmas alive. And the reason that was shared then and continues to be true is those needs that are so prevalent, seemingly, at Christmas time, are prevalent all year round. There are children who are hungry. There are families who are struggling. There are children who need to learn to read. There's a teenager who needs to be understood. There's an old friend who could appreciate a phone call. And there's that person living in a retirement center who needs a visitor. All of those needs still exist. It's about our reaching out and doing it. Even the smallest thing makes a big, big difference. And if we ever doubt that's true, we need to think of the words of Betty Reese, who said, "If you think you are too small to be effective, you have never been in bed with a mosquito." Every little act makes a huge difference. You see, our faith is not just about talking the talk. Talk won't get us anywhere. It's about walking the walk. It's about living and acting a life of love and caring and compassion. It's so much needed in this world. The Buddha said this, "Teach this triple truth to all. A generous heart, kind speech, and a life of service and compassion are the things which renew humanity." And after all, that's why we're here.